just reach a little harder. Whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in there, that person needs to be like your cheerleader and your guide at the same time. I think the best vocal producers that I've ever had are the ones that like push me until I'm fucking blue in the face and don't want to keep doing it, but it's like, you've got one more in you. I know you do. Like, let's just get this and we can go home.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Other World Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free introduction to mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you are in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jonathon Jircitano, a vocalist and songwriter who started playing in rock bands at the age of 12, and after fronting bands for over 6 years, he decided to start performing solo after inspiration sparked working with former Cage the Elephant member Lincoln Parish. Jonathon spent time living and writing in Los Angeles, focusing on creating his sound with influences from artists such as Imagine Dragons, Phantogram, and Imogen Heap. And having recently moved back to Nashville, Jonathon's upcoming debut will merge genres in alternative and pop with hints of blues, electronic, and his permanent roots of rock. I met Jonathon through Matt Mahaffey, also on the podcast in episode 69, when I was looking for a background vocalist for a session. I texted Matt and I was like, dude, we need to do backgrounds on this session. Can you do it? He couldn't do it. He was like, hey, here's exactly who you need to do it with. And so he texted me Jonathon's number, and, Matt mentioned that Jonathon sings like an angel. Those were his words. So I did invite Jonathon on a session. Matt was absolutely right. Jonathon has a beautiful voice and easily jumped around from style to style in the studio, creating big, lush vocal stacks of verbed out hooks, and can do like great soul, powerful individual voice as well. So today I'm psyched to talk about Jonathon coming into the studio, creating awesome, big, lush vocals, and what it means to get great vocals in the studio and as an artist. So please welcome Jonathon Jircitano to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jonathon, are you ready to rock?
I am ready. Thanks so much for having me, Lidge. Pumped to be here.
Dude, my pleasure, man. Glad to have you back in the studio.
Awesome.
Like I said, it was really cool to have you in on a session.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you just have this ability to sing really well, which really helps,
Well, thank you.
But I also noticed that you really were very, very versatile, and you like nothing fazed you. You were not afraid to just go for it and build a vocal track, do harmonies, stack stuff,
No, I appreciate that. One of the things that I attribute just to being from Nashville, you're always around all sorts of different types and genres of music, and I've been lucky enough to have been able to sing on a number of records from a bunch of different genres, and generally speaking, they give me sort of creative license with a lot of the backing vocal stuff, and so I get to sort of, stretch my knowledge there and just sing what I want and figure out what works.
Well, I know you've done a lot of cool stuff. I didn't really mention it in the intro, but you've done sync license tracks for ABC. You've done all kinds of co-writing stuff. So, if there's something I didn't mention, feel free to bring it up on the podcast too. Cool, man. Well, let's start at the beginning. You talked about being in a rock band at 12 and doing that kind of thing. What's your instrument?
Sure. I'm a guitarist and a vocalist. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I started playing guitar when I was really young. Both my parents play, and they started teaching me. And, at some point I sort of exacerbated their knowledge and started taking lessons from someone and trying to, I really was a blues guy. As soon as I heard Hendrix and Clapton and these guys, I just was obsessed and had to, that was the path.
That's the stuff that worked for me too. You're throwing a little Frank Zappa in there too.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So where were you growing up?
I grew up actually about 25 minutes outside Nashville, just north in Springfield, Tennessee.
Okay, dig it. And so Hendrix and stuff like that was your influence. Your parents were musicians too. Was that kind of their jam, or were they more into country music or Christian music, or was there any sort of background that you were coming from?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little across the board. My mom, she listened to everything from the Indigo Girls to Zeppelin, and my dad raised me on John Cougar Mellencamp to Van Halen. So it was everywhere, but I feel like I had a pretty broad upbringing.
Nice. Was there a moment where you decided, this is what I'm going to do for a living?
That was certainly later. I was bit by the bug when I started playing guitar and getting somewhat good at it. I started writing songs when I was early in high school. And I was also a baseball player at the time. And, for me, at least in my head, it was between the two. I was like, I'm either going to be a professional baseball player or a songwriter or a musician. And I didn't grow past 5'9", so I think the baseball thing just kind of worked itself out.
Do you have to be tall to be a baseball player?
Not necessarily, but I think the average would be over that.
All right.
So.
What about shortstop?
Sure, it's in the name. So yeah, I did my senior thesis on songwriting. Actually, I wrote a gosh.
This is college?
Yeah. Senior? No. Sorry. Freshman. It was high school.
Yeah.
Our senior, it was like our senior project. I did mine on songwriting and gave like a 20-minute presentation on it and stuff. It was
dig it.
Pretty cool.
And then, so you're saying that by the time you were out of high school, you had sort of decided that you wanted to do music. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty early. I mean, you make it sound like it took you a minute to decide. I mean, I'm like, I didn't know what I wanted to do out of high school.
Yeah.
I thought I did.
Yeah, and granted, I mean, a lot of things changed along that path, but I went to Belmont for a couple years for music business, and I feel like I'm sharing this anecdote a lot, but I was in the music business program at Belmont in 2004, 5, 6. Now, 2004, I believe, was when MySpace came out. So immediately, the music industry was sort of turned on its ass by the internet. And everyone was scrambling to try and figure out, like, how are we going to, make all this work and keep up with the times and, keep our bank accounts, showing in the positive.
Stay solvent.
Yeah, exactly. So, eventually, I was watching the curriculums of these classes that I was taking just sort of become somewhat obsolete in real time. And I made the decision, it was probably, I mean, I don't know if it was the right or wrong decision, but it was the decision I made was to drop out in my sophomore year and pursue
your MySpace page,
pursue my pursue a career in live music. I wanted to be in a touring band, and I'm not even entirely sure where I was going with that, but yeah,
right.
It's just changed along the way.
School, then deciding I don't know if I need the school, I need to just pursue this other thing.
Hard knocks.
Just getting out there and working in the industry and all that. You talked about, or you mentioned, thinking you wanted to kind of go this direction and having to navigate some, some left turns at Albuquerque along the way through your music career. What do you remember about that? Because I think, I just had lunch with a couple of interns and a previous intern, and I'm just watching these guys go through that mental, questioning process of like, well, I think I want to do this, and it looks like this, but they can't necessarily really explain it yet. What do you remember about that process, about what you thought you wanted to do and where you thought you wanted to go with it versus when you look back on it, you're like, no, this is clearly where I was, headed?
I think as like a late teen and early 20-something, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, it was somewhat difficult to trust my gut. There's so many catalysts being thrown at you for like, this is what you should do with your life. Or even if you want to like boil it down a little further, this is what you should do with the career that you've chosen. There's a lot of bugs in your ears always, especially in this business. And
do you feel like those are always external bugs, or do you think sometimes we just make our own?
I think sometimes we make our own for sure. And sometimes they just, they morph from something that someone said, you take it and you run with it as like the, the like theme of your life. But so I would say, if I could go back and trust my gut a little more, what I wanted to do then is sort of what I'm doing now, but I had to go through a lot of trial and error to get here.
All right, so how do you describe what you're doing now?
Well, I've got my irons in a lot of fires, but I'm writing songs for a publishing company called Prescription Songs. I am playing in 2 different bands. I play for a hard rock band called the Dead Deads. I play guitar for a country artist named Jordan Davis, and I am also an artist, first and foremost, who writes, records, produces, and releases original music.
That's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah.
So, these, playing in a band, I know the Dead Deads are super cool, so I don't think I put a link to any videos in the YouTube playlist that I put together for your episode.
Sure.
A reminder, rock stars, that you can find stuff we're talking about in the show notes. Just click through on your phone, or if you're on the desktop, just look on the website, rsrockstars.com, and just look for, type in Jonathon Jircitano, and it'll take you right to the episode. But I always make a playlist of Jonathan's tracks on YouTube, just because that's the easiest place for anybody to click through and listen.
Cool.
But the Dead Deads are super cool, man. Tell us about those guys too.
Oh, it's been so fun. Letitia Wolf and I were in a band together in 2014. Just hired guns for a girl named Alexa Carter, and we got to know each other really well. And around that time, Tish had started this band called the Dead Deads, and it was a heavy, grungy, kind of throwbacky rock band, and it was all female at the time. And I saw them play. I was really thrilled about what they were doing and sort of watched their trajectory over the next couple of years while I was doing my thing. And I was living out in LA at the time, and Tish called me and asked me if I wanted to fill in on a tour opening for Seether. I think that was the end of 2017. And I said yes, learned the music, came to Nashville for a month, rehearsed, went on the road for a month, and
playing guitar
and singing backgrounds, and it was just a blast. And ever since, I've been doing that.
All right, let me ask you this question. I don't know if it was a specific, reason why they needed to bring in another singer and guitar player for the tour, or did it have more to do with that general question of like, band goes into studio, makes record, band needs to tour. Oops, we need another player to make this sound happen. Any stories you want to share around that?
I really don't know a ton of the details about that scenario, but it was such a natural fit that when I stepped into the position, we just locked and kept it like it was,
When you're making your own music, have you ever crossed that bridge where you're in the studio and you get a certain sound and you kind of like anything goes production, and then you're trying to figure out how to play it live on a stage?
Say that one more time.
So it's just the difference between producing an album in the studio and taking that same album out on a live show.
Right.
Sometimes, like when you talk about joining a band to play guitar and sing, I'm thinking in my brain, maybe, a band goes out and they're going to do a live show, and it's now that overdub that we did for those cool extra guitar parts.
Right.
It's like, oh, we're going to need somebody to actually come along and play those because it's more than the number of members of the band, for example.
Sure. I think we're in an interesting and kind of divisive time with that concept because, there are a lot of bands out there that are utilizing tracks and playing that stuff. And some, people are very purist about it and will say, no, we're never going to do that. I would say the Dead's, I don't think anyone would necessarily be opposed to doing tracks at some point if it got to that point, but we haven't had.
When you say tracks, you mean playing pre-recorded tracks,
playing
on the stage
pre-recorded tracks to make the make the thing stand up and be bigger or sound more like the record. We haven't had the need to do that. Yeah. The four of us on stage have been able to pull off, sounding as close to the record as possible, and you kind of shift parts around and you make executive decisions here and there about like, yeah, maybe people aren't really paying attention to this part. It's not a focal thing. It lifts up the thing as a whole, but as far as playing the song live, it doesn't need it.
Right. Right. What about for your music? When you're doing your own music, are you ever thinking about that?
Yeah, I've done both. Honestly, I've played to tracks before. I've stripped it down. I'm not super married to either way. My biggest thing with running tracks live is I don't want to do it if the set depends on it. I want to run tracks if it helps make the thing, stronger as a whole. But if the tracks were to somehow die in the middle of the set or something, I want us to still be able to pull these songs off and make them sound badass.
When you're playing to tracks, this isn't really a live performance podcast, but I think that these questions are really relevant because sometimes we have to ask these questions in advance when we're hitting the studio.
Absolutely.
What does it mean? Because I've seen artists who are like, I've done a record with an artist where they're like, yeah, I go out and I play these shows, and we did a power pop record, but this artist was going out and playing, like Americana acoustic. And then somebody wants to buy the record at the end of the show, and they're like, well, I want a record that sounds like Americana acoustic of you playing, Now I'm forgetting where I was going with that. But I guess that's why I'm talking about this stuff. When you've played on stage with tracks, what's that experience like for you? Are there things that you really dig about the sound of being on stage with the track versus things where you're like, I hate this part? I
mean, it fills it up. It gives you a little bit more chordal kind of structure to sing to and whatnot. But like, I do my best to sort of forget about it. And even if there's a click or whatever it is, I just try and lose myself when I'm on stage. That's sort of my motto. If I can, own what I'm doing up there, it doesn't matter what's happening.
Dig it. I was looking for the title of this song on my notes here, and I don't see it. But I know some of the tracks that you shared that we put in the YouTube list have got some real programmed stuff to them.
Yeah.
Shoot, I wish I could see which title it was. Was it
Just for Show?
Was it like Big Love or something like that?
Best Love.
Thank you. Sorry
Best
about
Love
that.
is.
Sorry about that. You're right. It was like my third question. That's
Yeah.
why I didn't see it. I was trying to get to it right away. But Best Love, for example.
Yeah.
What a cool sound, man. Totally awesome program.
Thanks,
sound.
man.
Killer, like crazy, like shredding your head off, distortion stuff coming in on vocals and tracks. How would you take a production like that and go perform that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've only performed
you
that.
Know it yet, right?
Yeah, so I've performed that song once in LA, and we did do it to tracks, and it was killer, super fun. If I was trying to do that a little more stripped down, I would probably hire a guitar player who's very pedal heavy. I'm playing with a guy right now named Dylan Williams, who's fantastic, and some guy that knows how to utilize their guitar and their pedals to make it sound like just a multitude of things, and
so you can really get variety of
get
guitar
super
sounds
weird
on
with
stage.
it, Yeah, but I think there's always a way, and you just have to be creative with it. There's a band called AWOL Nation who had a big song called Sail a couple years ago, and if I remember correctly, like they were using horns on stage to cover a lot of the low synth stuff, which was really cool and creative.
And certainly watching horn players perform on stage is an interesting visual, you know?
Right.
Would you ever say no to an idea in the studio because you're like, I can't do it? It's not going to work for my stage show. Do you see that happening?
Absolutely not. So I idolize, like I hope most musicians do, the Beatles. And, you know, the Beatles didn't tour hardly at all. As if, to my knowledge, they did like one big tour. And I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know everything about their touring history, but they were all about the studio. You know, they were all about let's make something incredible and epic here. And that's what I want to always try and adhere to, and just like when I'm in the studio, let's just try everything and we'll put it all down and we'll strip away what doesn't work and we'll worry about live later.
All right, dig it. All right, so now of course the topic of this podcast is how to record awesome vocals in your studio. So let's jump right to that. I like to ask guests as we kick it off to share an inspirational quote to get us psyched about hitting the studio. Is there anything you want to share to just kind of get us kicking off on the podcast?
Absolutely. Just a very quick backstory though. One of my favorite bands is sort of a new wave band from the mid 2000s from LA called Shiny Toy Guns. They have Shiny Toy Guns. Yeah. So they're a keyboardist and one of the original main members name's Jeremy Dawson. He was playing here in Nashville and me and my buddy were sitting around with him and I've got to paraphrase it because I can't remember, but he was like, when you're writing a song and when you're recording a song, if you take the part, whatever instrument, vocal, bass, synth, if you take the part and you strip it down to its bare bones, take the delay off it, take the reverb, take all of that crap off of it and listen to the part itself. If the part is not awesome, then it's not awesome.
That's good advice.
So that's something that's always stuck with me. You know, when I'm writing a part on no matter what instrument, like write it clean and then put the filters and all that stuff on it later to make it cooler. If it needs to, you know, amp it up at the end of the day.
Now, does this mean that when you're writing a song, it's totally cool to just write it on an acoustic, even though you're going to be rocking out on an electric later? Or is that not really where we're going with this?
No, that's one way to take it for sure. Now, I don't always just write songs like that. I mean, I'm very modern with that, with the writing process too. You know, I'll write songs on a laptop just like everybody does. Yeah. But yeah, I love stripping it back like that.
Now, if you're writing on a laptop, do you always have an interface and a mic hooked up, or would you ever just program on the laptop and just use the built-in laptop mic for your vocal ideas?
Yeah, I'll do that. I mean, a lot of times I write a cappella. I'll come up with melodies and lyrics. I'll write an entire song a cappella, sing it into my phone, and then find the chords that work with it later.
Nice, man. I like that idea.
Yeah.
What about pitch? Do you find you need like a reference note to make sure you're in the ballpark, or does that not even matter?
It generally doesn't matter. I'll figure it out later, even if I have to go up or down with it, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump into some vocal questions.
Sure.
Tell us about your home studio. You know, what's your setup like when you're recording yourself? You know, here we just talked about a laptop and not needing anything but probably a pair of headphones.
Sure. So I have just kind of switched over from Pro Tools I've been on Pro Tools for a few years, still love it. But I wanted some new inspiration, and I switched over to Studio One by Presonus.
Oh, sweet, man. I was just at the Presonus booth out in NAMM checking out all their new stuff.
How was that?
It was very cool, man. They have a couple of new controllers, the Fader Port 8 and 16.
Oh, sick.
Which I'm pretty excited to check out. It looks like I can just like walk around the studio and set that on my lap and
that's
have
awesome.
faders and start mixing from different places.
Presonus is a cool company.
Yeah.
So I just got started with that DAW, so I'm a little bit of a baby with it, to be honest, but it's very intuitive, man. And a lot of the commands, you know, are similar to Pro Tools. And not only that, you can do something with one button on Studio One that usually takes 3 or 4 commands on Pro Tools. So that's kind of nice.
Watch out, Pro Tools.
Yeah. So, but that's been a new thing that's very, inspiration inducing, if you will.
I know Studio One has some really cool features, like a lot of plugins, a lot of instrument sounds and stuff like that, so that you can just literally start out with that and you've got like a complete library of stuff to work with.
Absolutely.
Loops, you can drag loops right in, sort of like you would on Logic.
Yeah.
Just drag it right onto the screen. And plugins, you can drag the plugin and drop it on the screen.
Sure.
And now you're affecting
the
sound, which
nice.
Is kind of fun. You
know? It's so nice.
And then I know there are other features like, again, I don't do this enough to describe exactly how it's done, but you can quickly and easily program a knob somewhere to control
macro,
another knob on macro. And I think you can quickly and easily program MIDI knobs on a controller to control macros and things within the app.
Yeah.
It's pretty hip.
It's really cool.
Let's hope that Pro Tools that's recording this interview isn't hearing us talk about this right now.
Yeah, let's hope.
But dig it. All right. So,
sorry, Pro Tools.
What about your studio? So you've got like you using Studio One. Are you always on a laptop? Do you like to have a separate dedicated studio computer?
Yeah. So I have a computer at home, a desktop, and then I just got a new laptop. So my biggest thing for this year is about being portable. I'm going to be on the road a lot, so I want to be able to set up my whole rig in a tiny little closet if I have to. I'm going to be out with Jordan a handful of weekends this year, and being able to get the idea down at any given moment is going to be imperative for me. So I've got a Pelican case with 2 like 4-inch PreSonus monitors, a really basic. I basically got the PreSonus bundle to take on the road, and it's awesome. It's like seriously so awesome. I got the whole setup in 5 minutes, and I can press record.
What's your interface that you're going to use?
It's just a PreSonus audio box,
like 2 ins, something like that.
Super basic,
cool.
Like just to be able to record guitar, bass, and vocal, and the rest is in the box.
Yeah, all right, dig it.
So,
and then what about laptops? So I have an older laptop, and I was thinking about what my new laptop options are. What were some of the considerations you had to make about saying like, this is the laptop I'm going to get for my portable rig?
Well,
or the considerations you remember making?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I just wanted something reliable, and this industry is pretty much Mac exclusive these days.
Right.
I was a PC guy for a long time. My desktop was a PC, and I got along fine. It was just the compatibility between sharing and stuff. But I just got a brand new MacBook Pro, souped up, super fast, and it's gorgeous. And there are still no fingerprints on the screen, and I don't know how long that's going to last.
I was told that there are some limitations about the hard drive, like you can't have multiple hard drives inside or even change it out. Do you remember whether that was an issue?
I don't recall. No, I'm not a computer genius either,
right.
though.
Well,
so
that's a good
I
part
haven't
of the answer
encountered any issues.
Do you usually bring an external hard drive with you to do stuff like that?
Generally speaking, I do, just to have an extra backup. You can never have too many backups.
Yeah, totally. So
I learned that lesson the hard way.
But otherwise, the music that you're recording, the songs that you're, songwriting and stuff like that would just kind of live on the main drive on your laptop? Right
now they are. I mean, I'm gonna fill up a little space before I start relying too much on the external. But
yeah, okay, dig it.
I'm not.
Well, it's just good to know that you don't have to sweat it too much.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I got a souped up computer, thankfully, so it's gonna last me a good while. I hope.
Do you use Dropbox a lot?
Yeah.
And do you find that that's always filling up, and you're like, it's crowding up my system drive?
Yeah, I had to pop for the, it's not expensive, like $9.99 a month for the extra terabyte, I think. But yeah, some people have complaints about Dropbox. I've never had an issue with it. So
well, one thing you can do. So let's say you're finding you're filling up your hard drive on your laptop, is you can go into the preference and say, just don't unsync a certain number of folders in my Dropbox
Right.
so that they can live online or be on your studio computer, but you're not carrying them around on your laptop all the time.
Right.
So that's kind of a way to get around it. But once again, we should talk about vocals. So, all right, what about mic? What do you got for vocal mics for your studio?
So
yeah, just give that
I meant
to say
I meant to say this a minute ago, but so I have a co-producer who's also my best friend from high school. His name's Matthew Oxley, and we work together out of his studio most of the time when I'm in town, out in Hermitage, and he has just an excellent mic selection. We're on most of the time we're using a Neumann something or other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like a crazy gearhead when it comes to that, but my mic of choice that I keep on me at all times is an SM7.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Dig it.
So
What do you like about the SM7?
I just think it's a very versatile mic, and it's durable. I can take it anywhere, and almost everyone's voice sounds great on it if you know how to run a good chain.
Yep.
So
that's been my experience. We've taken the SM7 down to Bonnaroo, the Hay Bale studio, for 14 years now.
Yeah.
And the whole reasoning behind it was that it just tends to sound good on a male voice, a female voice, a loud voice, a soft voice. It can handle everything. It might not in the end be your absolute number one top choice for a specific voice. If you shot it out against some other things, you might be like, oh yeah, I like this better. But it does, it takes the edge off things too. You know, it smooths things out, and it almost like compresses it to bring the voice forward in your mix more easily. Yeah,
I would agree. It's just a very versatile mic. You know, I'll put it up against an acoustic guitar or even an amp sometimes, and it's kind of like for me at least, it's a good mic to just have in a jam.
So I was just out at NAMM, which I was talking about, and one of the booths I stopped by is Aston Microphones, a British microphone company.
Okay.
They make a lot of really cool mics, including a pair of mics called the Starlights that have laser beams on them.
Oh, shit.
Laser beams. But they also have a new one called the Stealth, which is kind of exciting. It is an SM7 style microphone.
Cool.
That has 4 switchable voicings on it. So you can switch voice 1, voice 2, guitar, and dark. And it has a built-in mic pre built in it too. So it's fan empowered. So you turn the button on underneath, and the lights glow, and it gives you like 20 dB of gain, similar to taking an SM7 and plugging it into a cloud lifter,
nice.
Which is kind of hip. But if you're singing really loudly, I was like, well, what happens if somebody's really like belting? They're like, just turn the power off, and it just drops back down to a passive one.
That's great.
Like, that's pretty cool. So I'm excited to check that out as another option.
Aston, you said?
Yeah, Aston mics.
Cool.
So yeah, Rockstars, you might want to check that out. Maybe if I think about it, I'll drop a show note link in there. Cool. All right. So SM7, anything about condensers that you find you like or don't like, or reasons why you're ever like, man, I'm sure glad I'm using a condenser right now?
Man, I'm so far away from an expert on any of this side of things. I more know what I like to hear, you know, and if I'm being honest, my favorite vocals that I've ever recorded are surely on a condenser mic, like a really nice Neumann or Blue or something like that. But if we're just going back to preference, you know, if I have a desk full of every kind of microphone out there, surely I'm going to try them all and just see what sounds best. And sometimes your ear is just tuned differently on a different day, and you're going to like this thing sounding better than this one. Yeah. And sometimes the song just calls for a different sound, a different timbre and tone of a specific microphone. But
how often do you get a chance to do that, where you're listening to a different mic and you're in headphones and you're like, ooh, I like this one better than that one?
Rarely.
Rarely? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I've noticed that myself, is that it's one thing to try and choose a mic for somebody else who's singing, but boy, is it a different experience when you hear your own voice coming through a mic into a pair of headphones, and you just instantly get this sense of like, ooh, I like that, or I don't like that.
Yeah. Sadly, a lot of recording for me today is about speed. So there isn't a whole lot of picking and choosing between certain pieces of gear. But when there's like a budget for a record that we're getting to take our time on, absolutely. Like I love just like, let's find the right tone.
All right. So let's jump to this question. You're in the studio with somebody else or maybe recording yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself being aware of too much compression on a vocal sound? Do you ever notice that? Is that an issue? Is it a non-issue? If it's a non-issue, fine. But
I've been writing pop for about 3-4 years now, and pop vocals are all about over compressing everything. So I think I've sort of grown accustomed to hearing a lot of compression on a vocal, and I like it. I like it most of the time. But yes, once in a while, there's a song where, we want that distance.
Mm-hmm. You want to be able to like have natural dynamic in your voice and not hear it get squished out.
But it's taken a while for my ear to really become in tune with what compression even sounds like sometimes, because it's a very subtle thing to someone who doesn't understand it, and I feel like I'm learning new things about compression every day in the studio.
So when you're recording yourself on your own portable rig, would you put any kind of compression while you're recording?
I slam the hell out of it.
Okay, so where and how does that happen? At what part of the stage? Would you drop a plug-in on? You're not using an external compressor, right?
No, generally speaking, no. I mean, my favorite go-to vocal plugins are the CLA plugins. I love the Crystal Lord Alge stuff, and those compression features within that plugin are pretty, I don't know, they're pretty versatile. So sometimes I'll slam it hard, and sometimes I'll just turn it off completely. But
in this case, this would be like, for example, an SM7 plugged straight into a PreSonus USB interface, and you gain it up till it feels about right.
Yeah.
Any rules of thumb for how hot to make it, or when is too much, when is too little?
I generally am just looking at the meter and trying to get that green bar just barely touching the yellow.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you will just drop on whatever plugins you want onto that track.
Post.
Now, what about latency? Is that sort of something that's an issue, or do you just get used to that?
Not lately. Hopefully I won't be running into that too much. I mean, yeah, when latency is an issue, obviously we'll just go into the bit and sample rates and just mess around with that until it drops off. But yeah, I haven't had too much of a problem with it.
Okay, cool. Sometimes I wonder if you're training yourself on a system that has latency, you just get used to it and it's not a problem while you're working until
I've been in that situation for sure. I've recorded an entire record with one ear off with both ears off because the latency was so bad.
Really?
Yeah. That was a long time ago, granted, when I was learning things, but one of sort of my resolutions for this new setup is trying to keep my gear as clean as possible.
Yeah.
So I don't run into that as much.
Yeah, because you like to work quickly and stuff like that throws you out of your
Absolutely.
groove, right? All right, well, so let's talk about lead vocal setup and sound or anything like that. I mean, we've kind of talked, we've already introduced that. Maybe it's an SM7 straight in, maybe you're using some plugins to kind of gain up the sound in your ears. What about the difference between a lead vocal part and sound, and how you would approach that versus a background part? What are some things that you might do differently with the DAW when you're recording, or with how hot and the gain is, stuff like that?
Interesting.
Or is it more like you just get your vocals ready and you just sing differently?
I mean, part of it is singing differently, I think. This is a very like use your intuition when you're doing it kind of a thing for me. Like we were talking about how hot do you want it going in. I try and feel it in the moment, because it's always going to be a little bit different, especially if I'm singing the vocal. If I'm running it for someone else, then, I'll just sort of have a go-to chain that I'll manipulate after the fact. But for myself, I'll get the input level and I'll roll off some low end up top and throw on some basic compressors and then just start singing and sort of twist a few knobs along the way. But most of the time I'll just get the vocal down and sing sing to the mood of the song and then go back and do all the stuff in post, whether it's some light tuning here and there, and obviously you're taking out and muting different things.
Yeah. So, all right, 2 questions around that. If you're in Studio One, then that should have Melodyne built right into it.
It does.
Okay, so maybe describe what that process is like.
Honestly,
like, I just sang my vocals, I comped it, I want to do some, quote, light tuning.
This is my first experience with Melodyne, so I am not even there yet.
All right, take it. All right.
Do you use it?
I use it, but I don't use it in Studio One.
Right.
So I was just sort of curious about some of the button clicks that make it
Yeah,
happen.
so my co-producer he knows Melodyne in and out, so I'm going to be taking a crash course on it very soon.
All right, dig it. Well, rock stars just know that Melodyne is built into Studio One, so you've got like one of the most powerful vocal tuning tools coming with your DAW if you go that route. I use Pro Tools and I use Melodyne, and I can put Melodyne on as a plugin on each track in Pro Tools, and I find that it's really useful if I want to do, like you said, some light tuning on that track. But if I want to really like dive in and manipulate all my harmonies and check everything against everything else and really tighten it up and tune the entire vocal track, then I find it's more useful to export my vocals out, pull them into Melodyne Studio as a separate, session, and just work entirely within Melodyne Studio. And the biggest reason for that is the fact that when you work with Melodyne as a plugin in Pro Tools, the transport is controlled by Pro Tools in the Pro Tools window, or your vocals are soloed, manipulating the transport in the Melodyne window. But you kind of have to go back and forth. Whereas if you're in Melodyne Studio, you just stay in there and you do all your navigation right there in that window. Yeah. And like you said, I like to work quickly. So anything that stops me from working quickly,
I love that you can utilize it just like, auto-tune and put some light tuning. But you can also, it can pretty much be an instrument in its own right. And you can manipulate the vocal in such a way that it becomes an entirely different melody or different, you can adjust the formants and all sorts of things. Yeah,
it's also a great way if you want to really tighten up your double vocal track and make it be like almost impossible to notice underneath your lead. You can super tighten things up in Melodyne that way.
Yeah.
Which might as well talk about that for a sec. What tips do you have for doing, well, first of all, do you do vocal doubles of the lead? Is that a thing?
Almost always.
Okay, so talk us through that process. What's the smart way to do vocal doubles? What are the obstacles you'll run into that people maybe don't know about?
Well, doing like a true vocal double has just as much to do with the pitch as it does the consonants hitting at the same spot. And you can always edit that stuff into place, but like, if I'm doing the doubles on my own at home, I'll probably do 10 passes before I get to the right one, because I'm trying to almost entirely mimic what I did the first time. But one of the things that makes a double special to me is trying to alter your voice just slightly, the tone of it just a little bit, to where it gives a little bit of a chorusy effect, but not like an annoying amount. But once again, it depends on the song that I'm doing the double for, because sometimes I want the doubles to be matching in volume, and sometimes the double is significantly lower, just sort of lifting up the original vocal.
And you feel like you have a sense of that when you're actually recording the double, as opposed to I'll just mix it one way or the other later?
Sometimes it's trial and error.
Yeah. I know, there's so many different varieties of vocals. There's so many different ways you can sing. You sing harmonies, you sing counterparts. They might be part of a stack of vocals. Sometimes, you might be going in to do oohs and ahs that are meant to be like almost like a synth pad against the track. Sometimes it's a lead vocal. Sometimes it's a double. Let's talk about some of those things, because I think each one gets approached a little differently. First off, the stacks idea, like this is a part, but it's not one voice doing it. It might be 12 voices doing it. Some parts require a lot of vocals, right?
Yeah. I do a lot of vocal stacking. Working with Lincoln has been a lot of fun, and we still work together. Him and I were just writing another song a couple days ago, but we stack the hell out of some vocals, man. And sometimes we don't use all of them, but it's just a testament to getting that idea down in the moment, whatever it may be, and then stripping it away later. But we'll usually do 3-4 of the same vocal, and it's just
same part.
Yeah, same part.
So if a part has 3 notes to the part, then that's 3 times 4.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. So that's stacking like 12,
which is like a Beach Boys.
Yeah,
it's that whole idea. I remember hearing that they might do like 6 for each part.
Sure,
something like that.
And you don't always use all of them. Sometimes you get back to the room and you're like, okay, well that was overkill. But sometimes it adds a really cool effect, and that's not even to mention the, octaving parts. A big part of my, early exploration of this new like solo thing that I've been doing for the past 4 years was doing a lot of octave parts on the lead vocals. I was singing almost the entire songs with like a falsetto octave of the main
just
melody,
an octave above the main lead.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that, how do you describe what that sounds like? I think of Squeeze. Squeeze was a band that had octave vocal parts all the time, but I think it was 2 guys both singing those parts.
I don't know if I'd do an accurate job of like describing the sound, but you've definitely heard it. And, I would say a lot of the vocals you hear on pop music have this effect going on, but most of them are not as extreme as we were going for. Like, we wanted the vocals to be like just same volume like that all the way through. It's just got a really cool effect.
Do you think that a lot of what we take for granted in pop music is way more vocals than we realize going on at the same time?
What do you mean take for granted?
Well, I mean, like, we hear a song and we're sort of we're focused on the main melody and everything, not realizing that there's like parallel harmonies going along with it, that there might be like an octave low, there might be an octave above, double going on.
My theory with that is pop music is so, it's so like pristinely edited that you don't notice a lot of those characteristics because of it. The chops are crisp. The edits, the tuning, everything is literally perfect in those pop recordings. So you don't notice a lot of those idiosyncrasies because it's so clean.
And how much of that do you think happens in the singing stage versus after the singing, the post-production tightening stage?
Now, I think a lot of that's going to have to do with the artist, because there are artists out there like Charlie Puth who has perfect pitch that you're not going to have to do nearly as much with him as you might be with this other artist over here who can't sing a lick, but he or she is, huge for whatever reason. So they have to spend a lot of time, tuning and editing that vocal to make it sound like they want it to sound.
How much of your own production, not putting you on the spot for like how perfect your vocals are going down, but how often have you gone for something in the studio and when you're singing it, you're like, this doesn't sound right. Like, I'm not quite hitting it, but I'm confident that when we finish with the post-production, it'll be just fine. I'd
say that happens almost once a session.
Okay.
But that's also part of being a very critical artist of yourself, at least.
And you did mention it's better to put it down, record it, and then not use it later than to not have it.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just pride getting in the way. I think it's really important for the studio to be a safe space to like let your ideas see the light of day, because in here is where we try things and where we discover things, and like it's where happy accidents happen. A lot of the coolest shit that I've ever done on a record, I didn't mean to do. It's like you try this thing, you maybe make a mistake or hit a wrong note, and that wrong note becomes part of the hook.
Yeah. All right, dig it. So, Rockstars, we're going to take a break for just a sec now. We'll come back in for the jam session. Reminder that you can find links to what we're talking about in the show notes. We'll include links to Jonathon cracking his knuckles on the mic too. Background. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah.
I always make references to like background noises, but by the time we're done mixing, I'm listening. I'm like, man, you can't even hear it in the background anymore.
That's funny.
But anyway, dig it. We'll see you in just a minute for the jam session. Cheers.
Rockin'.
This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you are ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you are using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to mix in your own studio and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now and look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Other World Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your existing Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD drive, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. Hey Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Jonathon Jircitano, an amazing vocalist, and we're going to jump into some specifics about singing.
Cool.
And just getting stuff to sound good. You ready to jam?
Yes, sir.
All right, so one of the vocal things that I might do in a studio session that could come up a lot is like, oh, we should do some oohs here or some ahs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always remarkable to me how we might hear the idea of a part, but then you go out to do it and sometimes it comes off easy. Sometimes you just can't get anybody to sing an ooh that doesn't sound like it's wobbly and all messed up sounding. Sometimes I'll think I can go in there and sing it better than the other person who's singing it. And then I go out there and I'm like, my voice won't do it. What have you learned about great stacked ooh and ah tracks? Where do they come from? How do you breathe on the mic? How do you approach that? When do you get out there and you're like, oh, that's not the way to do it. I'm screwing it up again.
Well, to all you vocalists out there, I try my best to not have caffeine several hours pre-recording. It really messes up my breathing. It makes me shaky. So that's one of my biggest tips. I wish I took my own advice more often.
Yeah, I just had another espresso.
Yeah, sometimes you just need it to get going. But my experience is being well fed, but not full or hungry while you're on the mic, not having too much caffeine. And here's a big one for me: stretching. Like, not just stretching like warming up your vocals. Obviously that's important, but I like to stretch out my entire body like I'm about to go for a jog, and it just makes me breathe deeper and smoother and easier, and helps with those longer, like legato notes when you're doing those.
What about vocal exercises? You said those are obvious. Tell us all about them when it's not so obvious and we've never tried them before.
Yeah. So
what are some great ways to warm up?
YouTube, man. There are a ton of videos that you can literally just sing along with the videos. I've taken lessons from several people, and, generally speaking, it's the same kind of roundabout stuff that you did in choir class in high school, like me, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that is great. I think it helps with all the shapes that you're going to be making for words and whatnot. One of the biggest things that helps me is just picking a song or a couple of songs and getting really familiar with those tunes and singing them as your warm-up.
Okay,
something that
makes sense.
something sort of expresses your range to a pretty good degree.
I was working with an artist, and she recommended that, even for my record, I might consider vocal lessons. And I told her that, like, for some reason I carry with me this baggage of thinking vocal lessons means, American Idol, The Voice, and stuff like that. And I come from this indie rock background where I think there's a perspective, a baggage that I have where I'm like, vocal lessons, that's not what you do for, if you want to sing like Bob Dylan or something. What have you learned about that? You've taken vocal lessons. Have you found that, no way, dude, you had no idea until you take a vocal lesson just how useful it is no matter what kind of music you're going to sing? Or do you think it is really just for those who want to be on The Voice?
I mean, I think it depends on what kind of music you sing. I think if you would have given Bob Dylan vocal lessons, he wouldn't be Bob Dylan,
Oh, really? So like if he had been, he might have been trained out of a certain style?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's no way to say accurately, but,
So would you give somebody advice not to take vocal lessons?
I'd have to hear their voice first.
All right. Well, what would you listen for?
But just certain things that they do naturally. I mean, a lot of the vocal lessons that I've taken have been more about breathing than actual singing.
Right.
But I think it's important that you choose the right teacher. The teachers that I've had have been great for me for stamina, for extending my range and not changing what I do naturally about my voice. But I don't know. It is a kind of a divisive subject, and at the end it is very a subjective thing. It depends on what you're singing. If you're one of these, if you're doing these operatic, like long belty notes, you probably should,
because you need that.
know
so
how
it's
to
like
do it
training
right.
For a sporting event.
It's a marathon, man. Those people they're the most susceptible to, hurting their chords at the end of the day.
I've noticed singing songs myself that I can sing certain lyrics and notes surprisingly differently on different days, different times. Sometimes I can relax my way right through some melody line that I came up with. And other times my voice just keeps, doing a wobble and a, something right around certain notes. And I always wondered, if vocal lessons would be really a good thing. Maybe they do just help me learn how to be relaxed through a vocal part.
I haven't done it in years, but I have no qualms with them at all. I think you should try it.
All right. So I know you haven't done it in years, but maybe do you still have any tips for the rock stars if they're like, yeah, I think I do want to take some vocal lessons? Where do they start? Where would you even look?
That's a good question. I mean, if you have a good network of people, I would just start asking around. But like I was saying earlier, like finding, like treat it like an interview. Like do a lesson with someone and then a lesson with someone else and figure out what works for you.
Have you ever done one online?
No, I haven't.
I know they do exist. Monica, who I was referring to, gave me the advice. She found somebody where like she can do a vocal lesson through Skype, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think
that's awesome.
I like that idea a lot. So
that's really cool. Yeah.
And then I did search on YouTube the other day and I found like vocal warm-ups and I was like, oh, cool. So I started singing along to it in the car.
Dude, YouTube is one of the greatest resources for learning things for free in this age. It's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, some of us are listening to this podcast interview right now on YouTube.
That's amazing.
All right, cool. Let's see. What else? Working quickly in the studio, stacking those vocals, the oohs, the ahs, the stacked parts. What about the process of creating those tracks? What do you, talk to us about the way you like to work. Do you just make a vocal and then just make a new track and now you're singing on that one, make a new track, now you're singing on this one? Is there anything we need to know about panning those or like where do we put all these vocals when we're stacking something?
I think this is also one of those, to each their own kind of things. In Pro Tools, I did the playlisting vocal thing a lot. Sometimes I'd make new tracks, but I haven't learned that particular method in Studio One yet. But it doesn't really make a huge difference to me. Generally, I'll just duplicate a track and record the different takes that I want, and then do the edits later.
But if you're stacking a vocal, you're not talking about takes. You're just talking about layers, right?
Right. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
I
what
misunderstood
I'm talking about.
that.
Like this big, lush vocal
As
thing.
far as layering is concerned, I'll just duplicate the tracks, sing the vocals as many times as need be for each take, and then, panning, it kind of depends on the song and the effect that I'm going for vocally. Sometimes I'll run them all straight down the middle. But sometimes if you really want that awesome stereo vibe,
you just pan them hard left and
right. Yeah.
And then, so you just sang on a track in Studio One. You've got a couple of plugins on it. It's pretty hot sounding.
Yeah.
Now you're going to sing another layer of that. Does Studio One let you just duplicate that track? Now it's got the same plugins on it and everything, and you just kick it off and sing. Sing the next one.
Awesome. Just duplicate complete. Yeah.
Okay. What about the process of you sing that first line, it's just your voice going, ooh, yeah, by itself, because that's the most amazing background part ever, and that's what you're going to want to sing on your next record. But you go to double that. Now, of course, you're hearing that first one in your headphones, and you're hearing your voice now. Any tips for making it easy to do these layers and not like running into funny pitch stuff where the previous ones you just sang are throwing you off, or is it more helpful to hear the other ones? What's that?
I said take vocal lessons.
Just take vocal lessons, really?
I'm just kidding. No, that's a good question.
I mean, what are the things that will throw off your pitch, and how do you solve them?
Man, that's a good question. I guess for me, if I was having trouble finding the pitch on a certain track that I was recording, I would first identify what instrument was causing me the trouble. A lot of the time it's low end stuff that you can't really...
Something in the mix that's throwing you.
Yeah, so I might just completely mute that instrument and sing to one specific instrument, like a piano with some good solid low, mid, and high frequency range, so I can, tell whether I'm off pitch or not.
Yeah.
But doing doubles on that, I mean, that the double, it always is most dependent on the first vocal that I'm doubling.
So in other words, you got to nail that first one.
Yeah, the first one has to be right. Otherwise, what's the point of doubling
keeps throwing you off.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, or I feel like I've noticed sometimes that, when you're in the control room and you're listening to the speakers, you can hear the track and you're like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. It's pretty obvious what to do. But you go put a pair of headphones on and you sing out there. And boy, the subtlest instrument, like you just said, that's down there even low in the mix, that's throwing you off. It can really throw you off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wait, what was the question?
You're talking about
Sorry.
the low frequency instrument that's down there, that it's better to just mute it while you're working.
That's what I would do for sure. Yeah.
So I think as an engineer, it's a good reminder to us to, put headphones on and listen like that, and make sure we know what the singer's perspective is like out there on the floor. So in this case, I'm imagining I'm recording you singing, for example.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that process. So when you're working with somebody in the studio, what are some of the things that great engineers tend to do for you to make it easy for you to get out there and work? What are some of the things that seem to trip up the process?
For me, I was going to say, I guess everybody is different here, but for me, I don't like a ton of playback before I record my vocal. Like some engineers will give you just bars and bars of, before what you're recording is supposed to come in. And that just makes me get up in my head about what I'm about to sing. Like I like to just let's do 4 takes in quick succession, because part of part of singing a certain thing over and over is the muscle memory. You know, muscle memory isn't just your hands or your arms or whatever. It's your vocal cords too. So, you know, sometimes I'll even sing the part I'm about to sing while we're recording, while we're leading up to that part. So I'll sing it in rapid succession while the thing's rolling. By the time it gets, you know, to that bar that I'm actually singing, my voice is sort of already knowing mechanically what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great tip, and I'm glad to hear you describe it like that.
I hope that was articulate enough.
No, it was great, and I think that's one of the things that I see a lot. You know, for example, if I have a new intern or assistant helping me in the studio, is they will just have no sense of pre-roll. They'll be like, it'll be like way too much or not nearly enough to even understand the phrase that just happened to know that, you know, this is the one again and where you're about to sing.
Pre-roll's important for getting the right takes, for sure.
Which is another reminder why, like, any way you slice it, you got to have an understanding of music in the studio.
100%.
If you're going to engineer, if you're going to run the Pro Tools session.
Yeah.
Or the Studio One session.
Or the Studio
or whatever we got. And then
they're all good. It's all who's behind the board.
So now when you're singing up to that line, I know that different DAWs treat this differently. Some will play back the vocal that's on the track, but you can still hear yourself through the mic while you're leading up to it. And then when you press record, on that part of the track, all you hear is your voice now. And then some, like Pro Tools or the way I've got it set up anyway, is you won't hear your voice on the mic while you're leading up to it. Do you find that you prefer to always hear your voice, I do, coming through the vocals to the headphones, whether it's recording or not?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you don't, otherwise it's going to sort of change things a little bit.
Right.
And you want it to be as accurate a representation as possible, you know, up until the moment that it's actually recording your voice. So it helps me.
Now, I've noticed another thing, another instance where that's really helpful. You described about this idea of like you're pre-rolling up to it, not too much, not too little, but you're pre-rolling up to the punch point. And during that pre-roll, you're practicing how you're going to sing that line. So if you're in the control room and you're hearing this voice like totally out of whack on the first half of the chorus, and then all of a sudden the second half comes in and you're right in there with the part. And that helps you, place the recording, the punch in just right when it's supposed to be there. But also I've noticed that can be really a helpful technique if you're leading up to a part and you're supposed to sing a harmony and it's hard to remember where that note is. So like, it's a weird interval that lands right in the downbeat of the chorus. And if you wait to sing it right when the chorus starts, you go for the note and it's like way too low, way too high. And it's like, and especially with singers who don't necessarily do background vocals all day long, they may not be able to lock in that pitch mentally leading up to that. And so therefore, same thing you described, it can be cool to hold on to that note and just like sing that note, here comes the chorus, sing that note, here comes the chorus.
And there you are.
And then you're right there. And so you're like kind of blasting your way through it. So another good reason to be an input.
It's like repeating a phone number in your head before you dial it. You know, I need that note like completely stuck. So I'll sing it all the way up until you press record or you punch me in there. Otherwise it's just repetition until you get it right.
Yeah. And another good reason, rock stars not to give them 5 bazillion miles of pre-roll, because he's trying to hold on to that note leading up to the chorus. And it's like making it really hard to do. Yeah. If you got to listen to the entire song. Out. And then, I've noticed that as a musician out on the floor too, talkback can be an issue too. So like the conversation that an engineer might feel compelled to have with you when everybody knows that all you're trying to do is press record on the beginning of the chorus and do one more take, but to talk about it too much, as I'm talking to you a lot on the podcast right now, that can really throw you off of your groove,
Yeah. All those little things.
It takes a great deal of concentration to perform the part you're about to perform.
Most of the time, that is very true. Sometimes the part is so easy, I'm scrolling through Instagram while I'm singing.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's rare though.
Okay, let's talk about tools that help you figure out what the harmony should be and remember what the pitch is and what that part is you just worked out. I certainly have some processes by which I go through and I've learned, but I wonder if you want to, and I'm happy to share those, but I wonder if you've got some stuff that you find really useful. Do you like to have a guitar out there so you can pick up the guitar and like find the notes? Is it great to have, and these classic, black and white production in the studio things, you see, Burt Bacharach take the singers over to the piano and play all these voicings and figure it all out. Not all of us can just sit down at a piano and work out all the voicings.
Good point. Once in a while, I will pick up an instrument to try and find the right harmony. I think a lot of it is intuitive for me. We all are informed by what we, the music that we love and grew up on. And I grew up on a lot of really deep harmony music, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and Indigo Girls, and just stuff where harmonies were just as much of an integral part of this piece of music as the song itself, And so I think I certainly gravitate to whatever thirds and fifths at different points in the song, but I like to try and be creative with it. And again, it becomes sort of a trial and error thing to me. I just like to try every possible note until we get it right. And going back to an earlier part of the conversation, try everything. Like just try it all until we find it.
I imagine myself trying a lot of ideas and liking them all. And then when I listen to it, I'm like, boy, I sure wish I had spent a little more time trying to get that one idea right.
Yeah. Yeah.
In tune, in pitch.
Yeah.
Not singing the wrong note or whatever.
I've had several times in sessions where I'm, the hired background singer or whatever, and either the artist or the producer or whatever is like, I don't think we need harmony like all the way through this or like throughout this whole section like you did. And my response is generally, I'm just giving you all of this stuff.
Mute it,
and
Mother
you
Scratcher.
can pick and choose what you want and delete the rest. I have no attachment.
Yeah. Oh goodness, what was my next question? Harmonies. So the guitar, you don't really necessarily need it. Tools that I've found useful are a guitar, because as a guitar player, I can figure out what it is in here and kind of find the harmony on the neck, and then I can see or I can find the melody, learn the melody on the guitar, and then explore the harmony and discover like, oh, look, the harmony is playing the same note as the melody right here. Maybe we need to, come up with something different right there. I've noticed that a lot of times we can sneak in accidental unisons on the harmony part where we didn't mean to. We can, the parts that seem to get glossed over and nobody pays attention to are the quick passing notes and harmonies. And they're so terribly important if you want it to really sound great, I think.
Absolutely.
And sometimes just soloing the tracks in the control room, just solo the vocals, solo the background. Don't listen to the rest of the band for a moment. What are they doing together? Oh yeah, look at that.
Totally.
They're a mess right here.
Harmonies are cool because sometimes you get these magical moments where like a descending harmony and an ascending harmony meet, and it just creates this awesome thing that generally wasn't meant to happen. Right.
So they do end up in unison, and that's super cool.
Yeah.
I know that working with you, you're so capable and flexible, and you're so fast to hear how harmonies fit.
Thank you.
When you're working with somebody who isn't quite as quick at that, I've learned to invite them into the control room, get out of the headphones, come into the speakers, and we're all just standing around the speakers at a nice low volume, and you can come up with a part. But then a lot of times that part gets lost in the time it takes to walk out to the mic, get the headphones back on, somebody to, fill a glass of water. And so some tools that I'll use would be, a little keyboard. Sometimes, everybody's got an iPhone. You can pull up GarageBand, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pull something out, or like a Casio keyboard.
I haven't dealt too much with that, but the biggest piece of advice that I try and give people about harmonies and learning to sing certain harmonies is just remembering that a harmony is just another melody. At the end of the day, you strip everything away. If you sing a harmony by itself, it can be a lead melody. And if you can remember it and sing it as if it were and try and drown out the other stuff that's there, then it becomes a focal point to you. And you know what? Some people's musical palates or brains just aren't maybe trained enough for that, because we all have different backgrounds. But that has helped me a lot too,
So just give it its own, let it stand on its own. It's like your buddy Lincoln said, I think it was Lincoln.
Jeremy Dawson.
Excuse me. Jeremy, he said, if it doesn't sound good by itself, then maybe it isn't good.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's good advice. What about breath? What about taking breaths in the middle of a take? I've done a session with somebody where they're singing the song, and sometimes it takes me a long time to notice, you know what? Seems like the beginning of the song is always great, but then by the time we get to the second chorus, it's just like I'm feeling a little bit of an energy letdown, and then at some point I'll be like, oh, they're just running out of air.
Yeah.
They just can't, the voice just doesn't sound as good anymore, or halfway through the chorus. What stuff have you learned about that? Have you learned that it's more important to just simply write the lyrics properly to allow for a proper breath in between places? Or a lot of times are the lyrics just fine and we just have to train ourselves to just take a deep enough breath halfway through the chorus and keep going?
Yeah, I would try and not let the path of the song dictate, or let me twist that around actually. I would try and not let the breathing dictate the path of the song, because then you might be limiting yourself on where the song can go. I've been trying to combat the breathing stuff lately by exercising and, just allowing myself more breath. But it's weird. I mean, with being able to punch and stuff like that, for the recording process at least, I would just get as much stuff as you can and find a place where breathing isn't as detrimental to the take, even if you have to punch in where a breath might happen or whatever.
So sometimes you just record a handful of takes of just the second half of the chorus.
Yeah, absolutely. Or a line, sometimes a word.
Yeah.
You can, and that goes back to the purist thing again. Like, some people want the whole thing to be a take, or the whole chorus to be one take, or whatever. I'm just not that precious with it.
Right.
I want it to sound good as a whole. How we achieved it isn't as important.
Like, who cares?
To me. Yeah,
you can worry about that when it's time to do the live show.
It is. I look at it as art for sure, but I just have a different method.
Do you do some hip hop stuff too? Do you get involved with any hip hop tracks?
Once in a while. It's not my forte. I enjoy it because it's one of those things that's outside of my element, and it's just fun. And hip hop is about, fun and swag and feeling like a badass, Right. So maybe I just don't look at myself as a badass enough to do it.
Dude, we're all
I try though. It's
we're all
fun.
Working on our badass syndrome.
Yeah.
All right. So what about the times, how often do you work with another vocalist where you're producing another vocalist? Is that something you do?
Not a ton.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, do you give singing advice to other people who are trying to get there?
I've produced a couple vocals, and it's another sort of I don't want to keep saying trial and error. A lot of the recording process is trial and error. It's just how it is for me. But I think, the vocal is always very specific to the song and the vibe that you're trying to create. And, there are different ways to coax a character out of someone. And I think, from being the vocalist most of the time in the booth, I've learned a lot about how, maybe an engineer or a producer needs to speak to that person in order to really get the take.
Enlighten us, dude. We're dying to know.
Yeah. I mean, for me, sometimes it's a just a very honest or even gruff. I mean, I don't particularly love the gruff method, but I mean, it's like you're almost there, you're almost there, you're almost there. It's like just reach a little fucking harder, man. Like you've got this, like almost being sort of like a hype man or a coach of sorts. Like that was so close. Like just reach a little harder. Whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in there, that person needs to be like your cheerleader and your guide at the same time. And I think the best vocal producers that I've ever had are the ones that like push me until I'm fucking blue in the face and don't want to keep doing it. But it's like, you've got one more in you. I know you do. Like, let's just get this and we can go home.
Now, I've gotten feedback from the singer before where sometimes I think a singer is like, I've heard people say, don't just keep saying to do another take. Like, tell me what do you want different on this next take? And then at the same time, there also seems to be situations where don't fucking talk to me about what's the next take.
Yeah.
I mean, like, dude, it's like, I don't know what's going to come out when I sing it next anyway.
Yeah.
So it's really just like, just let me do it.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely. And it's not always just do another take. So sometimes it's, you need to pretend that you're Tom Petty in 1984 and you just did 2 lines below off the console and give this everything you fucking got. And I'm sorry for the visceral imagery of that, but yeah, like be someone else right now. That's so okay.
It's about finding the character.
Absolutely. For the song.
Yeah. I think that's good advice. That we've heard advice like that on the podcast before. Don't say how to hit a note. Talk about who that character is. Talk about
absolutely
the motivation. I think they talk about that in acting, right? It's not, you don't tell somebody how to do the inflections on the line. You tell them the motivation of their character.
100%.
Dig it. All right. What should the next question be?
Oh boy.
What's one of the most
that was
exciting
a question,
things?
Wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. What's one of the most exciting things about singing for you in the studio? What do you love about it?
Oh man. Man, I love just, I love exploring and finding the right thing. I mean, I hate being wrong, which is part of that process. But after so many takes of doing the wrong thing, you eventually uncover something that is just like what you feel at least is next level, and getting that part and then getting the harmony to that part and exploring whatever that vocal palette is for the song, coming back into the control room and listening through and just like that tingles moment where everybody's got their hair standing up on their arm,
Yeah.
I love that.
That is a good feeling. It's funny how you can arrive at that feeling sometimes in the studio and yet still you go back and listen later and you're like, what was I thinking, man? I know I was excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
That whole like self-doubt. And then you listen to it the next day and you're like, no, man, this is great.
And that's the part of like this whole thing being a journey and not a destination, because the next day it might not be awesome to you, but in that moment there was this palpable, feeling of, elation and joy between a group of people creating something original. And it may only last for that moment, but you had that.
That's true. You captured it.
Yeah.
In the song Best Love, your tune, that one really leapt out at me.
Cool.
You've got some killer distortion effects and vocal treatments going on. Can you share any thoughts about creating cool effects like that?
God, that song was so much fun, and I cannot take too much credit for that cool effect stuff that you're talking about, because my producer in LA for that song, his name is Spencer Bastian. Look him up. He is just an Ableton wizard. And Ableton has a really cool workflow because you can just sample these little bits of whatever it is, and just, funk them up and make them really neat sounding and time stretch and effect heavy and whatever. But he just has a really, really cool brain for that stuff. And so we got in one day. I had this little guitar idea and we laid it down, and we sort of just isolated ourselves. He was just doing his wizard thing on the computer, and I laid down on the couch and just went into lyric world for like 3 hours.
Nice.
And then we came back together and tweaked some things about each of our own parts. And yeah, that song
So
happened.
the vocals that become part of these sample nuggets to get effects in Ableton Live, is that something where, like, what does that feel like to you as a singer? Did you just sing a bunch of things and then he kind of would pick one and turn it into something new? Or is that something like where it's like, oh, let's try and do this, and then you sing something and then he tries and it's like, yeah, maybe, no.
That's a good question. A lot of the time when we've worked together, it would be the result of me singing a bunch of stuff, and then he'll just grab a snippet of some part that I sang and manipulate it and throw it in there somehow. And if we both are listening back and are like, oh, holy shit, that's dope, we keep it. And if it's like, that's not working, we try something else.
All right. What about that initial process that you just described of being in there and singing a bunch of stuff? What does a bunch of stuff look like? Is it just singing the song top to bottom normal? Or is it like, do you really go overboard and put in like lots of little crazy things because you just, one of them might sound cool? Like, in other words, if we heard you singing a bunch of stuff, would we be like, dude, what's wrong with that guy?
Probably.
Man? That's like a crazy way to do that.
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's different every time, but like that process with Spencer, for instance, was more, I would write a verse and tell him I wanted to try and lay this down, if nothing more than just to have the idea so we don't forget it. And sometimes you come back and look at it the next day and you're like, this is garbage, scrap it. But we record it, we've got it down, we go back and work on something else. Sometimes we'll do it in snippets like that, though. I'll write the verse and I'm feeling really good about it and just leave it alone for a while. And then, like I said, come back to it. It doesn't work. Time is... Some people don't feel this way, but I think time is such an ally for determining whether or not a part or a vocal or lyrics or whatever are actually good, or at least good to you, because it is subjective at the end of the day, but like good to you. If I leave something alone for a day, a week, a month, however long, and go back and listen to it, I have a way more like objective ear.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can go through hating and then loving and then hating and then loving again a record, given enough time.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, here's another question. You're going to go in and do some background vocals. Do you find it most useful to have a final vocal there before you start adding the background vocals? Does it matter if that final vocal is tuned or not tuned when you go to sing the vocals, backgrounds on it?
I mean,
what are some issues we'll run into about that?
I think you're going to get a much better take on my end for background vocals if what I'm recording to is finished, for sure. If it's tuned, then yes, it's going to be better as well. So yeah, I wouldn't bring in a background singer until the vocal is done.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good tip, man. I'm glad I asked that one.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes that happens. Sometimes people are like, yeah, we got something there. Can we just...
Yeah. But it's not always an option, Right. Sometimes you're running on borrowed time or someone else's pocketbook.
Well, I think a good reminder too is that lead vocal could be phrased so many different ways, and you're trying, don't take it for granted, but you're busting your ass out there to try and match the phrasing with your harmony vocal. And if we're going to go and just change up the lead later, it's like, then
that person might be having to match the background.
Right.
Which doesn't make sense generally.
Right. All right. Talk about doing the ABC Fall 2015 comedy promo that you included in the YouTube links.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I mean, that must have felt like a pretty cool moment where you're getting, hopefully getting paid to do something that's going to be aired on TV and just be out there everywhere. That
was one of my first wins back in, I think it was 2015. Is that what you said? 2015?
Yeah, I think you had written 2015.
2015, yeah. So I had just recently signed a publishing deal with Prescription Songs out of Los Angeles, and we were given some briefs for CeeLo, and CeeLo was looking for songs at the time, and he had, officially signed off on a couple tracks that he liked, and we were given those tracks to Top Line, And so me and Matthew Oxley decided to take a stab at one that we really liked that was produced by a guy named Accident out in LA. And funnily enough, Charlie Puth was actually on that track early on. And so we took a couple days and we wrote this song called Sunshine, and we loved it. We sent it to our people who also really dug it. And they sent it to Mike Caron at Warner Brothers and APG, and he was like, "This is really cool. I don't think it's done. Like, the chorus needs to be, tweaked a bit." So we got back in, tweaked the chorus, finished it. Everybody was on board with it. At the end of the day, CeeLo didn't think it was for him. Totally fine, but everybody still believed in the song and was like, well, let's find a home for it, Several months passed, and then we heard that it got picked up for this ABC fall comedy promo. So it was like all of ABC's big, comedy shows they'd spliced together, to promote their fall lineup of shows. And it was really cool because the song, like the lyrics of the song actually like almost perfectly fit each vignette scene from each show. So it was a neat moment.
I wonder if your music influenced the editor.
I don't know. I hope.
A lot of times, they're editing to the music.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to lock the timing. You can't change the musical timing to lock, to fit the
right
video edits, but you can make go the other way around.
Yeah. It was really cool though. And it aired for the first time during the ESPYs that year.
And I think that's a good reminder for us too about musical opportunities. Like you're going to write a song, you're going to record it. Maybe getting a sync is a good lucrative opportunity for music, but what does that mean? And here you are, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're talking about here's a television station that's just doing a promo. It's just an ad running to promote some other show.
Yeah.
And they need a music bed just for that promotional
Absolutely.
thing. And that could be a total win for you.
Oh yeah. We made a decent amount off that.
Good.
It was great.
That's all you got to say. The podcast is a decent amount, but we're happy for you. Just like that. Well, very cool. All right. Another question, talk about co-writing The Tide with Young Love. I mean, and talk about co-writing in general.
Yeah,
What does co-writing mean? Oh, you know what? I got to back up. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got another question for you.
Okay.
I meant to ask. You talked about a prescription. I think you said they gave you a brief.
Sure.
And then you also talked about, you said top line. Can you explain both those terms?
Absolutely. So, I guess a brief could be referring to several things. In the way that I used it a minute ago, it was just an email saying that CeeLo was looking for songs and that he was looking for like upbeat, kind of happier, this kind of song. So that's just like a brief one pager about like, if you guys want to work on this, here's something very intentional and deliberate that we have a pitch for.
And that's a common term in the publishing industry, right?
Yeah. And then, more like a sync brief would be more like, hey, Grey's Anatomy is looking for a song to fit this scene. It's really somber. And, they might even describe the scene like a patient just died and their family is, having a hard time or something like that, for instance. And it can run the gamut of emotion and all that.
And what kind of brief did you what was the word you used for a brief that would be for someone like CeeLo? So a sync brief is for a show and
I don't know. Just an artist brief, maybe.
Right,
yeah.
See, this is good stuff because, you will be sitting around at a table full of people and they'll be talking about that, brief, this, that, and then we'd never heard it before.
Sure.
Like, I'm wearing a pair of briefs. Yeah. I know what y'all are talking about.
And we get really, really long ones too, that are more in depth. We get like these who's looking lists every quarter of like artists, who their A&R is, what kind of songs they're looking to round out their record, like from every label out there. It's pretty cool. And, we don't always choose to do that every time we sit down to write a song, but it's good if you're, maybe lacking inspiration for that day or just not sure what to work on.
So we're leading up to the co-writing question, but
Sure.
publishing deals as a songwriter, how do you know if that's the right avenue for you? What should the rock stars know about, yes, go look for publishing companies. Here's where to look for them. Here's how you find them. Here's why it's a right fit for you.
Yeah. That is a very good question. I think it all depends. It all depends on what you're trying to do and if you want to give away some of your publishing. I mean, I made the decision because I found a really awesome team of people. I've always kind of skirted around the pop industry, but really wanted to be in the middle of it, doing it. And Dr. Luke owns Prescription out in LA, and he's been on some of the biggest pop records of all time. And I've always wanted to sort of try my hand at that kind of stuff, and ended up with them and have had some cool opportunities because of that. But the benefits of being with a publishing company have been, amazing for me. They've gotten me into a lot of really cool rights that I don't think I would have been able to get into otherwise. They've got avenues to exploit my songs in ways that I otherwise wouldn't have.
Well, such an important part of the music industry is networking.
Absolutely.
And it's another way to, take advantage of the network of people that are there. Okay. So, one other question about publishing agencies. Should the rock stars be thinking that that all publishing agencies are pretty much similar to each other, or, do publishing companies, focus in different kinds of styles and genres, just like a songwriter would? And so, in other words, if you write, I don't know, weird accordion tracks that are,
they're all different.
Yeah. Like should you, no matter who you are, should you go looking? Because there may be a publishing company that is a cool fit for you, in other words.
Absolutely. There are publishing houses in every state, and there are obviously the biggest ones, the most notable ones are going to be in, LA, Nashville, New York, Atlanta, the big music cities. But they all do different things. And, my method of going about any sort of business venture is the people first. And of course their contacts is really important in this industry, but I like working with people that I get along with, that believe in me and that push me. And that's what Prescription offered me more than anything else, I think.
Nice.
But there's someone out there for you, for sure.
All right. So
let's
go to the question that we'll wrap up after this, but talk about co-writing The Tide with Young Love, and talk about
co-writing Young Love with The Tide. Yeah.
Sorry. Co-writing Young Love with The Tide.
Sure.
And some of your experiences in co-writing in general, like what are some things that you've learned to get the most out of a co-write? What advice do you want to share about that process?
Sure. So that song was written initially by Nate Campany, Nick Ruth, and myself, all Prescription writers out in LA. And we were initially getting in on a session to write a song for me in the early days of my artist project out there. And we were like, let's vibe on some Killers sounding stuff. And we wrote Young Love in about 5 or 6 hours. We were all really pumped about it, but at the end of the day, felt like the subject matter was just a little too young for me. And damn near a year went by, and it just kind of sat there, but I think it was about that amount of time. And then I got a call one day, and it was like, this band wants to cut your song. They were a new pop rock band on Island Records, and they contributed some creative stuff to the song. So, they became co-writers on it as well. And then they eventually released it as their first single, which was really cool.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, co-writing is an interesting thing. I hadn't done a ton of it prior to being involved with the publishing company, but it's different with everyone. Finding a really special co-writing relationship has everything to do with just trying write with people.
It's
You know,
like a
you're
people
not,
thing.
you could be best friends with someone and your creative flow might not be awesome.
Nice.
Or you could be best friends and your creative flow is great. You just have to try. And I think the most important thing about a good co-writing relationship is you feel safe in the room with someone, being honest about the flow of ideas, you know?
So you can't necessarily co-write with your serial killer who is holding you captive. That's
I
probably
wouldn't
not gonna
recommend
work.
it.
Yeah. All right. Dig it. Any other tips as far as, you show up to a co-writing session, how to feel more prepared or, not over-prepared, not under-prepared?
I mean, my biggest piece of advice is read the room. I try not to be the bulldozer or the doormat.
Right.
It's easy to be a yes man in those situations.
How big is the room? How many people are in this room?
It varies. In Nashville, I think it's pretty standard to have 2 or 3 max. But out in LA, I had 4 or 5 sometimes, which is it gets a little bit too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes. Yeah. But
maybe not the best place to be a good listener.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you there when we wrote that song?
Yeah, I don't remember you saying anything
for that one.
Sometimes that happens.
What do you know about that? I remember hearing people talk about, if you're in the room, you're a writer. Is there any?
It depends on the disposition of the other writers in the room. Some people feel like it's an energy thing, and if you were in the room, then your energy contributed to the creation of that song. And I think it's a case-by-case basis with me. Like, a lot of times I would probably agree with that and give someone, even if it's not an equal percentage, then something. But
if you're just outside the room, what if you're just on the other side? It's a very thin wall.
You have to be in the room. No. You have to be within the threshold of all the doors leading to that room.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you one more question, and then we'll wrap up here. This is hypothetical. Okay. We are going to go take the Wayback Studio machine and go back in time. You're going to find young Jonathan, 12-year-old, rocking out on his electric guitar.
That's scary.
And you burst into the practice room, and you yank the plug on the PA, and you pull it out of the wall and kill the whole session. You say, "I've come back to give you this one bit of advice, young Jonathan.
Oh boy.
Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day," and it's not practicing, or maybe it is. What advice would you go back and give yourself?
It's confidence, man. Every bit of this whole deal is confidence. No one's going to believe it if you don't.
So maybe you wouldn't be a big, a full-grown asshole walking into your younger self, but be a little more supportive than
I was I mean, I don't know if anyone would have characterized me as an asshole at any point, but I definitely saw myself as one. I was an egomaniac, but like, don't get so caught up in what everyone else is thinking about it, because at the end of the day, it's what you think about it that matters and what makes it art.
Yeah, dig it. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for all this great insight into making cool records, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks for having me, man.
A lot of great tips on getting great vocals in the studio. So let the rock stars know, how can they find you online and follow up with you and go check out your music?
Honestly, Google.com, search Jonathon Jircitano. Every one of my sites comes up immediately. I am the only Jonathon Jircitano in the world.
All right, so Jonathan spelled within a T-H-O-N.
Yes, it's
J-O-N. J-I-R.
Yes, Jonathon. Last name Jircitano.
Awesome. And Rockstars, of course, will have links in the show notes, including a YouTube playlist, so you can go check out Jonathan's music and some of the songs we were just talking about. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you around the studio, dude.
Rock and roll. Thanks for having me, Liz.
Cheers, man.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. Also, remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with these weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com. Look for the link in the show notes. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio, all totally free. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.